Hello and welcome to the Gorilla Guide webinar on tips for supporting a remote workforce. Thank you so much for joining us on today's event. This is the second of the Gorilla Guide webisode series events. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Really cool presentations are in store. So thank you again so much for joining us on this event. Now, before we get started, there's just a few things that you need to know about this event. If you haven't been on a webisode before, you might have heard we have some prizes. I'll talk about those in just a moment. We want this to be an educational event. So I encourage you to use the questions box. It's on the left-hand side of your audience console. I can draw your attention to it there. And if you click on the questions box, I already see lots of, good morning, hello, welcome comments from around the world. So thank you for those. We will respond to all of those. But we also encourage your questions about today's topics, and we will be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of today's expert presenters. So get your questions in early. We're all facing remote workforce challenges, and there are no dumb questions. We all need help, I'm sure, in that area. We also want this to be a social event. I'll talk about the hashtag over on Twitter here in just a moment. And then resources in the handouts tab, we do have links to each of the respective homepages for today's presenters. So make sure you check those out there over in the handouts tab. And with that, you should know that we do have 3 Amazon $100 gift cards we'll be announcing on this event. Those will be between the presentations. You must be live in attendance to qualify. I'll be verbally announcing those prize winners. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. We will reach out to you after the event to deliver the prizes. The terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. Now, being as this is a Gorilla Guide event, I wanted to point out here that we at ActualTech Media have supported and continue to support the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and the One Tree Planted charity. You can download all of the Gorilla Guides, free ebooks. These are really high quality. These aren't like 10, 20 pages. These are really high quality, professionally authored, expert authored, professionally laid out, high quality ebooks. And the cool thing is they're completely free. You can download them over at gorilla.guide. So make sure that you just put that in your web browser in the address bar there, gorilla.guide, and you can go directly and download as many Gorilla Guides as you would like. And with that, you should know that today's social media hashtag is GGWFH, Gorilla Guide Work From Home. Today's event is produced by ActualTech Media, and you can follow me over on Twitter, David M. Davis as well. Follow ActualTech Media on Twitter as well. We're always posting our latest and greatest content. You can subscribe to all the ActualTech Media channels, YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. That's in the iTunes store. And we post our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn. So follow ActualTech Media on LinkedIn. All right, lots of good comments coming in. I'm going to get to all of these here in just a moment. Before I do, I want to do a little bit of stage setting here for today's topic. I bet that almost no one planned for a pandemic in their disaster recovery and business continuity planning. I know when I was an IT manager, we went through tons of different scenarios, and I'm sure that we never talked about pandemic. And if someone did bring it up, we probably had a good chuckle about it, that it was never going to happen. However, that being said, we did plan for a lot of scenarios in business continuity planning where everyone would be working from home. So, for example, the corporate office burns down, the data center's gone, everyone's working from home. What do we do then? And so, in some sense, we did do planning back then, but I'm sure not everyone had a really high quality plan for that scenario in production and ready to go. And so a lot of companies out there are struggling because most companies are now 100% work from home. Many of us have never worked from home before. And that's kind of the other side of this coin here, is that even if your company had a great work from home plan, most of us have never done that for maybe more than a day or two. If we got sick or something like that, we worked from home. So it's really new for a lot of us, and most IT organizations and even the companies, weren't designed for work from home in mind. And honestly, it's hard. And the question is, how do you get really successful at it? And so we'll be talking about tips on today's event for both sides of this coin here. Technologies do you need in IT to make work from home and a remote workforce a success? And then what tips and tools and um, practices and habits do you need as an IT professional when you're working from home? So I think you'll get a lot from this event today. The technologies at play here in the IT organization for work from home are virtual desktop or VDI, desktop as a service. Of course, you need to secure that with multi-factor authentication. You'll learn about that on today's event. Distributed backup and data protection, distributed across hundreds or thousands of home offices. You got to protect that data. You need collaboration tools to work together, things like Slack, Teams, and so on. Security tools to ensure that our home computers being now used as company computers, aren't hacked or data isn't lost. And then, of course, the executives want to know what are the employees really doing out there. So there's a lot of different technologies here. This is a new reality, for most of us, and organizations are scrambling to support their people. Thankfully, we have new technologies. For example, this webinar, things like Zoom, Slack, Teams, all these technologies are making work from home easier than it could have been in the past, but it's still a challenge. And of course, there are a lot of policy frameworks that weren't really designed for work from home. But that's really, to me, the future of the remote workforce. Hopefully, one day we'll all be back in the office together. But at some companies, that will never happen, and maybe we don't want it to happen to some degree, because we're enjoying this flexibility. But it also has to be productive, for the company. So the management of employees who are working from home, in some cases it's harder, in some cases it's easier, because we have these really nice quality tools. It's important to have a community still for the company and for the IT organization, and really understand that everyone is impacted. And also don't forget security for the sake of expediency. We can't forget security, because if, for example, we're hit with ransomware, um, it could spread, across the company, and could take down the whole company. So I really look forward to what normal will look like in a year. But today we're talking about work from home because that is today's reality. So thankfully, we have a great lineup of expert presenters from companies at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Okta, Nebulon, NVIDIA, and NetApp. You'll hear from experts at all of those companies today with their tips for supporting a remote workforce. Now, before we jump into it with today's first presenter, I've got a couple of quick poll questions for you, and I will share the results of these polls with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers on today's event. The question on the screen is, with the pandemic impacting businesses of all sizes, what do you expect to be the impact on your IT budget for the next 12 months? Is it decreasing? Is it increasing to support the remote workforce or for other reasons? Or is it simply staying the same? Nothing's changing. So I see a lot of responses coming in already. Thank you for those. If you haven't answered a poll like this before, you just do it right there in the slides window. All right, excellent. Thank you everyone for your responses there. Let me share the results with you. And it says that 53% see an increase in their IT budgets. That's good news. 29% said it's staying the same. That's still good news as well. I mean, if you add those two together, that is, don't make me do math on the fly, but 82, if I'm not mistaken, 82, 83 percent roughly there. And then 17% said decreasing. IT budgets will be decreasing. So good info. Just one more poll here before I introduce our first presenter from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. and that is, with most companies working from home, which of these are you most concerned about? And this is a multi-select question, so you don't have to select just one. Select as many as you feel uh, are concerns for you and your IT organization. And if there's something that's not listed, then drop it in the questions box there, and I'll share your concerns with everyone here on the event. All right, thank you everyone for responding to that poll. One person said their concern's not listed. Just drop it there in the questions box. I'll share it with everyone. And let me share the results here. And 70% said security. That's the number one concern when working from home, followed by 62% who said data protection, 31% said collaboration, and 19% said virtual desktop concerns. William said his concern wasn't listed there, and it is maintaining engagement and productivity. I thought of putting that on the list there, and I wish I had of, because that might have been actually the number one concern for everyone, is just staying focused, right? When you're working from home, you're not used to working from home, and maybe there's a lot of distractions. The kids aren't in school; they're they're running through the office as you're trying to work. So I know we're all trying to stay focused and maintain, that engagement and productivity with our jobs, and trying to encourage our employees to do the same thing. So thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts there. Now it's time to kick off today's Supporting a Remote Workforce Guerrilla Guide webisode event with our first presenter. And that is Mr. Chuck Wood, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Chuck, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Hi, this is Chuck Wood, Senior Marketing Manager for HP in our storage division. I'm here to share with you some key information and insights and tips for supporting a remote workforce in these unprecedented times. Let's begin. So today, as customers across the globe are dealing with this unprecedented situation with the pandemic, they're relying more and more on enabling a mobile workforce. And virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI, is very well suited to help customers as they enable their remote users and remote workers. Why is VDI useful here? First, it's a perfect solution that's been around for decades to support remote users, allow users to connect, access information and data from anywhere on any device. It meets compliance needs to make sure data is accessible, but it's secure, it's protected, it's available, but centrally managed. And it's an affordable way and an elegant way to address the needs of your remote workers through starting small with scale and then cost effectively scaling up to meet all your needs in one location or in multiple locations. Let's dive in more. As you look at VDI, it's really important to consider all the different needs and challenges by your different user communities. First, you have your users, the end users, your remote workers who rely on the access to data as they're mobilized, or in today's environment, as they're working from home. Solutions need to be reliable, always on, available, fast, delivering fast access to applications and data, and be able to be accessed from various types of environments anywhere that they're needed. Secondly, the business imperatives are important in terms of enabling users from a security perspective and a compliance perspective, but also addressing the cost that may incur in terms of delivering a total cost of ownership that's suitable for your needs. And then on the IT side, the challenges are numerous. You need to make sure the silos and the infrastructure needed is efficient and doesn't create extra undue complexity. You need to make sure you handle demand spikes of applications as users are all logging in at the same time, potentially morning, noon, and night, when they need to access data over the virtual infrastructure. As well, scaling, starting small and scaling in increments so that you don't incur downtime due to infrastructure. and ultimately as well, data loss in face of ransomware attacks and vulnerabilities. So how do you choose the right solution? This is a key tip. First, identify your user requirements. Make sure you understand the right performance requirements, how many users you need to support, and truly understand the requirements. Evaluate system performance. Don't just take products on face value or solutions on face value. Make sure that they have been validated with industry-leading benchmarks and solutions, even your own benchmarks. And finally, size the infrastructure correctly. This is very important. You may want to start small, but then scale in building block fashion to meet your needs versus over provisioning in an expensive way up front and eventually growing into it, not knowing what the performance capabilities are from that given infrastructure. So with this, in these unprecedented times, it's key to understand HPE is here to help. We have the expertise, proven technologies and innovations to solve these problems we just talked about and help with these tips I'm sharing with you today. And we can bring a powerful portfolio to bear to help you in these unprecedented times, coupled with flexible financing to address your needs and help you sustain and grow your business. So key to understand how HPE delivers this, we have unique solutions, including HPE SimpliVity, specifically designed to handle virtual desktop infrastructure with density, scale, and resiliency. How do we do this? We deliver unmatched, independently validated virtualization and a superior user experience. This is provided and validated by Login VSI certifications that we've done with the industry standard benchmark. This helps with boot storms, as well as showing how we handle literally thousands of desktops with peak and predictable performance. We also do this cost effectively to meet your budget needs. We can deliver more desktops on less hardware and do this in a very, very efficient way, up to 300 desktops per 1U node without compromising performance and high availability. This is truly unique, and we'll show more information as we go through this. We allow you to start small and scale in these affordable building blocks, so you can move from a pilot test with a couple users or tens of users or 100 users and roll it out to production where you're supporting hundreds or even thousands of users. And we offer enterprise class protection and resiliency, built-in data protection. You don't have to forego protecting these desktops in face of data loss or even in the event of a ransomware attack. You can quickly recover all your data and virtual desktops very quickly and easily with a few clicks. Key to understanding a tip around scaling as you size your environments is the notion that you need to start small and grow versus over provisioning, as you see on the left. When you may not know your needs, I might start with just a few nodes and a couple hundred desktops and then scale in these building block fashion. Secondly, independent scaling of compute and memory and storage is important. You can start with this infrastructure and actually add non-SimpliVity nodes to your environment to scale the desktop infrastructure needs. As well, a key ingredient to look for in any solution is inline dedupe compression optimization. This is very important with virtual desktop infrastructure, as many of the desktops are common, and you can get great efficiencies by allowing the storage to service many, many desktops. In the case of, on average, we're seeing 40-to-1 dedupe compression optimization for VDI infrastructure. And this notion here is that the best I/O is the one you don't have to do. And this is enabled by inline dedupe compression and optimization. Recently, we announced a new HP SimpliVity 325 that addresses and meets these needs. It's a 1U, very dense form factor platform that allows you to start small and scale in these increments. Each server delivers up to 300 desktops with knowledge workers per 1U, and it's been validated through login VSI testing. As well, we have proven use cases in the field with hundreds of customers who are running VDI. 26% of our surveyed customers actually run some form of VDI, be it Horizon View from VMware or Citrix Zen Desktop or other VDI infrastructure solutions. And don't take my word for it. Here are a couple great customer examples. This is a trucking company in the United States who, during the time of COVID earlier this year, actually had to increase their virtual desktop infrastructure. They doubled their virtual desktops overnight to allow their workers to work from home. And they incurred no performance impact for those users. And they actually gained agility in DR, allowing them to rapidly recover in the face of any data protection or data loss issues. And this is all delivered on a common platform. As well, a retailer in another location allowed themselves to scale from 300 virtual desktops to 700 additional ones for a total of 1,000 desktops to address the COVID-19 pandemic. This allowed their mobile users to continue to operate as they scaled and moved to work from home conditions. We have other customers that are seeing improved performance times as compared to alternate solutions, and it's all part based on the tips and tricks I've just told you today. So with that, thank you for the time today. We really appreciate your time in these unusual circumstances. Like to share, make sure you find out more information. Here's a Gorilla guide we've published that covers hyperconverged infrastructure use cases, including an entire chapter on virtual desktop and VDI. Also, check us out at hpe.com/SimpliVity for more information and many more user stories. Thanks for your time.
All right, great presentation, Chuck. Really appreciate that. Chuck is here answering questions electronically. So, if you have questions about the HPE SimpliVity solution and VDI, ask those there in the questions box, and Chuck will be getting back to you. Also, I want to call your attention to the poll question that we just brought up on the screen in the slides window. It says, what additional information would you like about the HPE solution? I'll leave that up for everyone to indicate their preference there. Of course, we appreciate your responses to the polls. So let me give you a moment to answer that question. And right after this next presentation, we'll be announcing our first Amazon $100 gift card winner. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And then the other 2 gift cards will be announced after the next 2 presentations following this upcoming presentation. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. We do appreciate it. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenters on today's event. That is Mr. Bill Peterson, Principal Technologist at NetApp, and Mr. Charlie Huang, Senior Product Marketing Manager at NVIDIA. Bill and Charlie, take it away.
Great, thank you. Today we're going to talk to you about how to support an elastic remote workforce using NetApp and NVIDIA solutions designed specifically for end-user computing and VDI technologies. So let's kind of set this up a little bit, and let's do that with some data points. So in a 2019 survey, 99% of survey respondents said they'd like to work remotely at least some of the time. And in a 2020 survey, 74% of CFOs said they wanted to shift some people to work from home permanently. Now, this is very interesting and very important to note. This is pre-COVID, both of these things. So with COVID and the new normal, these numbers, the 99% can't get much higher, but I would argue the 74% is probably even going to be higher if we were to redo that today. And the question becomes, why? Why? What are the business drivers for EUC and VDI? Well, from a organization point of view, they can lower some overhead to the tune of around $11,000. And how are they going to do that? Well, lower travel, lower real estate costs, lower utility costs, even things like lower janitorial services within the building. And for the employee themselves, they can save about $4 grand a year by the obvious one, less commute, food expenses at the office, clothing expenses, and more. And then the final data point on this slide is that 79% of survey respondents suggested that they increased their productivity and had better focus working from home. So there's some real drivers to do this, even if we thought about this, again, even pre-COVID, but with COVID, these become really compelling things to look at. So why isn't everybody out doing it immediately today? Well, there's a number of reasons, and some of those are in the data center itself and with IT. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is a select list, and you could argue that some of these things exist all the time, and I wouldn't argue with you. But some of the things we need to think about as we go to a complete work from home model and enable an elastic workforce is some of the compute intensive infrastructure needs that are required with people working from home. Reliability, availability, and uptime, always big concerns for organizations. Multi-tenancy, making sure that people have access to the right data and the right workloads to get their job done. Cloud versus on-premises for capacity planning and for managed services. Where are all these data sources going to be? And then once you have all these data sources in line and have managed them, can I use AI and analytics against that data to improve my processes, to improve my managed services, to improve my data uses, to make sure my users are happy? So how does that impact elastic remote workforces? Well, first, as we've kind of mentioned, they could be anywhere. And one of the interesting trends we're seeing is people are saying, hey, I don't want to live in Boston, for example, anymore. It's too cold. I'm going to live in the Bahamas. So these people are on the go, maybe not on airplanes and traveling, but they're on the go in that they expect to be able to work from wherever. And then we also have different classifications of workers that now need to be supported from home. So the three that we'll talk about today are task workers, and these are folks that do administrative or repetitive tasks. Knowledge workers are people that organizations pay for their expertise. So think about scientists, lawyers, doctors. And then power users are folks that their job requirements require them to have extreme access to data and in some ways, and sometimes administrative rights to data. So think about graphic designers here, audio and video producers, high-end power users of compute. And then what do we have to do with these people to enable their workforce? Well, we have to meet their graphics and speed needs and their requirements. We have to provision and get users running quickly. We have to enable multi-tenancy and make sure they have access to all the data they're supposed to. And then finally, we have to allow them to collaborate without borders from anywhere on any device. And how does NetApp enable that? Well, the first way we do that is through our data fabric approach, which is, doesn't matter if it's cloud, doesn't matter if it's on premises to us, you're able to get access to the data and get the data to the right people. If you want to do that in the cloud, you can do it with the NetApp Virtual Desktop Service and enable groups of users, 50, 100, 200 users in hours and have them up and running from wherever they are. If, because of regulatory or sensitive data needs, you don't want to have it in the cloud and you want it on premises, you can do that with your NetApp HCI. And the most important bullet on this slide is the last one, which is you can burst out from on-premises to the cloud, or if you're going to bring everybody back into the office, maybe burst from the cloud back to on-premises. Nothing changes there from the end user point of view. The data is still there within the data fabric. And now to talk about the combination of NetApp and NVIDIA, I'd like to turn it over to Charlie.
Thanks, Bill. And so as Bill mentioned, the NetApp HCI solutions are bundled with NVIDIA virtual GPU software. And there's different types of licenses. So the first one is the NVIDIA Grid Virtual PC software that accelerates office productivity applications, WebGL, streaming video, and it supports high resolution and multiple monitors for the knowledge worker VDI workloads. And then the NVIDIA Quadro Virtual Data Center Workstation software accelerates professional visualization applications that includes Autodesk Revit and Maya Dassault CATIA, SolidWorks, Esri ArcGIS Pro, and Siemens NX, just to name a few. And then lastly, there's the NVIDIA Virtual Compute Server that accelerates AI, deep learning, high performance computing, and data science workloads. The NetApp HCI solutions that Bill mentioned earlier are the H610C and the H615C, which are targeted for use with the Grid and Quadro software solutions that we'll cover in the next slide. So what are the types of EUC and VDI users? Well, in many organizations, you'll find different workspace requirements with all different types of requirements that requires different demands on the system to deliver the experience. For example, a one-size-fits-all desktop solution won't meet the different demands of a task in a power user. So if you look at a kiosk user in kiosk mode, it's often deployed where multiple users share a desktop in public access, and they're required to lock down an application, such as publish, subscribe, deliver, point of sale, registration, and check-in type of usage models. A task worker, could include a call center employee or receptionist. And those are good examples of workers that carry out specific task-oriented business functions provisioned through physical or virtual desktops. And then you have a knowledge worker where this group is typically engaged in analytical business status, strategy, and vision, and requires fixed and mobile access to resources such as SAP, Oracle, finance, and sales management data. And then lastly, the power users demand high function compute and high 3D graphical display capabilities. And these requirements are often assessed to be beyond the delivery capabilities of VDI solutions. So in this case, the NetApp HCI H615C with the NVIDIA T4 GPUs with RTX technology is the solution that's best fit for these power users. So we've said that using NVIDIA GPUs with NVIDIA Grid software results in a better user experience. And NVIDIA has an N-vector benchmarking tool, which measures user experience at the endpoint to provide a better understanding of how fast and smooth the experience is for the user, as well as image quality. So in a test to test the experience, we've automated tests running 32 VMs on knowledge worker workloads using applications like Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Chrome, and PDF Viewer using 4K display resolution. And comparing GPU-enabled VM powered by NVIDIA Grid VPC and the M10 GPU versus CPU-only VDI, the GPU instance saw 3 times better latency as reflected in snappier response times, 2 times better consistency of user experience by removing the peaks and valleys, and 1.5 times more remoted frames, resulting in better fluidity. The GPU accelerated VDI environment had better experience despite being loaded with 33% more users on the server. And we want to leave you with some resources that you could take a look at offline. A couple of the resources, if you double click on these single page, it'll provide you a summary of the solutions that NVIDIA and NetApp have to offer for remote workers. And this concludes our session. David, back to you.
All right, great presentation. Thank you so much, Charlie and Bill. Really cool stuff that you guys are doing there at NetApp and NVIDIA to support remote workforces. I've just brought up this poll question for everyone out there in the audience. What additional information would you like about the NetApp and NVIDIA solution? And I'll leave this up while we announce our first Amazon $100 gift card prize winner. So the first gift card winner on today's event, first gift card of 3 is Chris Tran of California. Congratulations, Chris Tran of California. We've got 2 more gift cards still to give away after the next 2 presentations. Keep in mind, these are short, fast-paced presentations. I really like this format. We're keeping things fast, and I know we're all busy, so it's a great way to learn about a lot of cool technology in a short, fast-paced event. So I hope you're enjoying the format as well. All right, thank you everyone who is responding to the poll. Let's get a few more responses on there. All right, thank you everyone who responded to the poll. We are bringing our presenters now into the room. I'm excited to be joined by Chuck from HPE, Charlie from NVIDIA, and Bill from NetApp. I'll leave out the last names for this fun, friendly chat here. We're going to answer questions from the audience. I want to make sure we have our presenters here. Chuck, Charlie, and Bill, are you there?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, this is
Hey,
Bill.
David. Hello.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining me. Really cool presentations, really cool technologies that you all just shared with us. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and kick off our Q&A. We've got lots of good questions coming in. If you're out there in the audience and you have a question about these technologies, now's the time to get those questions answered. So first question, I'll direct that to Chuck. They're asking, what VDI applications work with HPE? What brokers? Citrix, VMware, Horizon? What are the requirements?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, David, absolutely. So thanks. And as we've said in the prezo, VDI is one of the key use cases we've supported since the inception of SimpliVity. It's just so well designed for hyperconverged. 26%, we actually did a recent survey of our customers earlier this year. 26% surveyed across hundreds of customers are running some form of VDI. And this can include Citrix Zen Desktop, Citrix Zen App, VMware Horizon View, and we have customers running, just regular standard users up to knowledge workers, even up to power users, coupled with it and partnered with NVIDIA as well, running GPUs to accelerate their applications. So, but it's traditionally Zen Desktop and Horizon View are the primary traditional desktop apps we support.
Okay, nice. So a lot of flexibility there. Excellent. All right, let's see. Next question that came in, they're asking, and I think this is for Bill, or Charlie, actually. What industries does NVIDIA and NetApp remote work solutions target? Is there a particular industry, or is it really just across the board?
It's really across the board, David. In some of the resources that you see in the presentation that we have, if you click on some of those, it'll give you, especially like the remote work page, it'll give you kind of the solutions for particular industries, and then there's different solution guides and white papers for each of the industries. So it could expand to M&E, manufacturing, higher education, research. The whole gambit is where the users could benefit from this joint technology.
Yeah, this is Bill. If I could echo on to that, it is across all verticals, but in the last couple of months, I'll just give you anecdotal what I've seen. I've seen a real push in healthcare with kind of follow the moon or follow the sun, depending what analogy you like, technologies, and I think that's probably from the use in healthcare and how most of our healthcare now are 24/7 operations. So, the VDI and EUC technologies are being used 24/7. So we're seeing a lot of interest there. Media and entertainment, and I think again, given our new normal, everybody's streaming, right? I think the media and entertainment industry is looking at VDI and EUC tools to help them manage the streaming and maybe also do some, as we mentioned in the presentation, some capacity management there, because I would think capacity is a big one that they're kind of looking at today. And then finally, I think there's been a real big push for how would I phrase this? Companies that maybe had a retail presence and an online presence, which is basically everybody. However, the retail presence hasn't come back yet, whether that's due to state by state issues, or maybe that retail part of their business just is never going to come back. And now they're looking at, okay, how do I turn that retail piece that I used to count on as X% of my business into an online presence? And so that's another one that I'm seeing a lot of interest in.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Bill. Chuck, next question here for you. What are some of the largest and smallest deployments in terms of desktops that you've seen with the HPE SimpliVity solution?
Yeah, good question. And this can can run the gamut. And as the other said, it's applicable to almost every vertical. But we have some smaller hospitals that might have tens of desktops supporting the medical staff at these smaller clinics. We have the customer we showed in our presentation is a logistics trucking company, and they have workers that use VDI for their terminals and as well as their corporate offices. And they initially started with just a couple hundred, but then due to COVID-19, they had to move all their workers to home, and they literally went from about a couple hundred to over 500 overnight. They literally had the spare capacity. They sized their systems appropriately. They weren't running at redlining. They had sufficient capacity where they could literally spin up the extra desktops to the tune of 500. And then at the high end, we have a very large bank that has upwards of 10,000 knowledge workers running VDI across several data centers. So that's the breadth. But the key is you can start with one building block, as I described, and size it to your needs for 10 desktops, 100, 200, 500, and we support up to 300 now with our new AMD 325. Single U, a 1U server supporting 300 desktops. Imagine, cascading those up to less than a foot in height of 6 of these for 1,800 desktops. That's incredible. But when you start that model in the scale-out architecture, you can scale from a couple hundred to literally thousands very easily. And we have customers across the globe running in those types of geometries.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, I've heard of a lot of companies who have struggled to rapidly scale up their VDI infrastructures with the pandemic. Next question, I think this is for you, Bill. They're asking about business continuity planning with EUC and VDI. Do you have any tips around that?
Yeah, so if you haven't, go get your business continuity planning binder out and take the dust off of it and read it. But on a serious note, EUC VDI, from what we've seen in the last 6-7 months, is the #1 workload, if you will, as part of companies' BCP, and I think that's going to continue, for the near future, if not longer. And I think what customers have to do is think about EUC VDI as a delivery component of business continuity, and then also plan for that, right? And some of the things we talked about in the presentation was, I'll use multi-tenancy as an example, making sure people have access to the right workloads and whether they're a task worker, a knowledge worker, or a power user, as part of business continuity. And that may be something that they've thought of in the past as business continuity, but as Chuck mentioned, if they went from, say they're a company of 1,500 people and they had 10% of their workforce was the field, sales reps, SEs, and et cetera. But that was before. Today, it's everybody is remote. What part of multi-tenancy, for example, did they think about as a component of business continuity planning? And they may not have, I guess is my point. So, the 5 or 6 data center initiatives that we mentioned in the report, I think companies need to think about those in the guise of BCP and EUC VDI. So they can't be separate anymore, given the new normal.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. Next question, Charlie, they're asking about what hypervisors are supported with NVIDIA vGPUs and NetApp HCI servers.
Yeah, so really all the hypervisors are supported here. VMware, Citrix hypervisor, Nutanix, and Red Hat. So they're all supported. There's a lot of flexibility. I guess specifically, Bill, can you comment on what is immediately available on the NetApp servers?
Sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, Charlie, all hyperscalers or visors, depending on where you grew up, I guess, are supported, and that's part of, as we talked about in the presentation, the data fabric model, such that you can get to that data regardless of where it is. So if it's in the public cloud or if it's on premises in a private cloud, the design spec there is such that the hyperscaler hypervisor is not a limitation. Use what you like, and the reason for that obviously is access. But the other reason is obviously, multi-cloud environments mean in some cases multi hypervisors as well.
Yeah,
got it.
exactly.
Okay. And then, Chuck, I'm curious, on the HPE SimpliVity solution, are GPUs and accelerators supported to help with VDI workloads that have demanding graphic needs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We support it. We have a couple energy companies that use these GIS applications for mapping, and several of them use NVIDIA. I don't know the exact models. I think they're the M40s. Some are using the T4 GPUs as well. And then one of our marquee customers is a company called Red Bull Racing, Aston Martin Red Bull Racing. You may know them as the Formula One race car team, but they're essentially a high-end manufacturer. And they're based in Milton Keynes, UK. And they literally redesign the car every year. And they use everything from 2D to 3D tools, computational fluid dynamics applications running on Citrix, and it's obviously accelerated with NVIDIA Grid GPUs literally embedded with SimpliVity. So they have, they've collapsed the stack, server, storage, compute, all the data services, all the stack into these powerful modern HPE ProLiant servers, coupled with in partnership with NVIDIA, and that's what Red Bull uses. And that's not uncommon to any kind of manufacturing at a high end. They're going to look for that type of acceleration. But those are the two areas I most see it in, these GIS apps as well as high-end manufacturing. But other applications can benefit from the compute power that the GPUs give you.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our short Q&A panel, but it's been really great having you all on. Thank you so much, Bill, Chuck, and Charlie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, it's time to move on to our next presentation on today's event. I'm excited to introduce Kelsey Nelson, who's a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Okta. Take it away, Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Kelsey Nelson. I'm on the product marketing team here at Okta, and I'm excited to chat with you a bit about strategies to work from anywhere. So just a level set before we jump into some of those specific strategies, I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we're hearing from businesses related to this distributed workforce. So when we talk about the shift to telework, or that rapid shift that we all saw initially with work from home, it certainly includes a lot of new resource adoption, things like video conferencing, things like chat collaboration tools. But it isn't just the adoption of these new tools, it's also new processes, things like asynchronous meetings, developing culture, onboarding new teammates who may not have met in person. We have to rethink all of these different, not only tools, but the processes around how we engage remotely. There's also, too, a lot of security challenges that go along with that productivity side. So things like the instant challenges around BYOD. So if you didn't have a work device that you were able to take home, what does that mean for you? How are you starting to, maybe those devices, the line between personal and professional is inherently more blurred. And when we talk about the security landscape too, while I would love to say that threat actors were also kind of in a crisis, work from home, immediate telework, the reality is that they were not sitting still. And we saw from many of our partners, folks like Proofpoint and Barracuda Research, that phishing was up in over 600% in the first few months of the crisis. And at the same time, we need to have not only strengthen security, not only make things easier for our workers from a process standpoint, but we need to make sure that that user experience is consistent, positive, if possible even better than when workers were in an office. So there's a lot for businesses to tackle when it comes to this new distributed work from anywhere strategy. And really what we're seeing for businesses that are leading the pack and that are driving to be, get ahead in this environment are those that are able to best balance this productivity and the shifted security perimeter. So what we wanted to focus on today is just breaking down how you can leverage identity in that journey. So here I've used a sort of distributed work maturity curve for the identity component. So I'll walk through this very briefly and then we'll dig in on a couple of specific facets. So starting on the left, for many businesses before the crisis hit, they fell in that stage 0 bucket, which is that they had a traditional work environment where they may have had on-premises directories like an AD. They were starting to adopt cloud or had some cloud tools that they were already starting to leverage. Those things may not have been connected yet, and they may have had limited or even no remote access capabilities. What we saw when the pandemic initially hit was a lot of businesses were forced to move into that first stage, this needing to enable secure remote work and fast. So we heard from a lot of businesses that they needed to maybe extend their VPN capacity, and they were looking for something like multi-factor authentication to go along with that VPN. It could have meant rolling out new tools. We saw, and we'll talk about in just a moment, some of the tools that we saw on the rise when the pandemic first hit. We also saw that some of that focus on simplifying user experience. So as folks were getting access to new tools, how were we able to get them into and using those tools as quickly as possible? What we're really seeing next, though, and I would say that stage 1 is really led into the beginning of the summer. Now what we're hearing from many businesses is this sort of focus on what do we do next? What's this stage 2? How do we start to enhance productivity for this distributed workforce to enable them to work really from anywhere? And a lot of this has been around things like, how can we automate? How can we start to take things like on and offboarding and make those processes really simple and seamless, regardless of where that worker is? We're also able to look at things like, how can we allow our IT environment to be more dynamic to adjust with the shifting workforce? And then from a security perspective, leveraging things like context-based access controls. So looking at not just the corporate network, but things like the device posture or geographically where that user is, to set policies that better understand the potential risk of that user getting into a resource. And of course, extending those controls so that they're not just to cloud resources, but to on-prem applications or even infrastructure as well. And I think where we're that stage 3, where we're seeing businesses heading towards in the future, is that true zero trust access rooted in identity. So what I love about zero trust is that it's absolutely a security strategy, and it's a rethinking of how we approach security today. But in doing so, I think zero trust deployed well is actually also going to make things easier for our end users. Because we can better understand risk, we can do things like deliver a passwordless experience when the risk is low. That is not just an identity-specific project. I've mentioned at the end there, true zero trust is a holistic security strategy, and so that also does look like, how do you connect your identity system into other facets of a zero trust stack? So walking through a little more in depth in a couple of these. So one, that first stage was really around adopting new tools. And what I wanted to touch on is some of the trends that we saw initially when the pandemic hit. So Okta every year releases a Businesses at Work report that takes a look at some of the trends that we're seeing across our customer base. This specific report was a sort of a snapshot in the first couple of months of the pandemic on what tools and what changes we saw within that resources from our users. So it's about 8,000 customers, anonymized and aggregated, with over 6,500 integrations. And what we saw was, initially, I don't think this was hugely surprising. We saw a lot of the fastest growing tools when the pandemic first hit were things like remote access and video conferencing. So folks like Zoom, Palo Alto, Cisco were certainly at the top here. But it wasn't just about remote work. It was also about how do we enable our remote workers to be as productive as possible. So I'll call out too that you see folks like Proofpoint, the security awareness training that's high up there, as well as LinkedIn Learning. So it's enabling our workers to be not just access, but to be as successful as possible. Here's just another quick screen snapshot of what we showed earlier. It's really just a timestamp look at some of that fastest growing application, fastest growing integration within Okta. So on the bottom there, you can see the dates, and you'll see around March 12th, which is where we saw a lot of the states and a lot of folks were encouraged to work from home or asked to work from home. You can see that corresponds with a pretty distinct rise with in usage of tools like Cisco, again, Palo Alto, and Zoom. Here too is also, you'll see similarly on the bottom, dates around the same time as we saw the rise in those remote and collaboration tools. We also saw an increase in multi-factor authentication usage. So as many of you know, Okta has an MFA solution, an adaptive multi-factor solution that not only leverages context into making access decisions, but allows admins the flexibility to use different factors depending on the riskiness of that, of the policy that they want to set. So here we can see certainly a rise overall in all of these factors. So from SMS and voice to higher assurance factors like a YubiKey or Okta Verify, which is a mobile application. And in particular, that Okta Verify being most quickly on the rise within that time period. As we head into that next phase and really enabling productivity is not just about those applications, but about how do we make sure that users can access these new tools, but also the tools that you have already. So that could be something like an on-premises application as well. It could be a company intranet, it could be something like an Oracle e-business suite, but really thinking through, can we extend some of that secure access controls, not just to those new tools, but making sure that all tools are accessible for a user within one place. So this is just a look at something like an SSO and how you can combine all of those resources into one dashboard for your users to get access. I mentioned too, a lot of what we're hearing is around automation. So how can we help things like accelerating app deployment? So if you are getting a Zoom or something else in the next few months, how can you make sure to give access to those tools as quickly as possible to your end users? And do so in a way that ideally, that second point there is reducing the number of help desk calls or tickets, so it's easy for users to get on and get running. So something what you're seeing here on the right is Okta's workflow solution, which is just has a nice interface and makes it easy for you to set up some of those deeper provisioning and deprovisioning flows. So you can see just kind of the drag and drop user interface there to make sure that the right users have access to the right tools that they need. And of course, in doing so, that we can help protect against any security vulnerabilities with latent or orphan account access. Which leads me really to the last point here, which is around that idea of security and productivity through zero trust. So as you're thinking long-term, the idea that you can use identity as a foundation to have the right people, the right level of access to the right resources in the right context, and that we're assessing that continuously, it will really set you up for that long-term security success. And of course, making sure again that we're doing so with the least amount of friction possible, because when we have a really strong evaluation of our risk from the left side information, we can deliver, when we know it's low risk, something like a passwordless experience. And when it is a high risk, then we can take the appropriate action as needed. I know that was a very quick overview. If you do have more questions or want to dig in on any of these specifics, feel free to reach out. There's the okta.com/contact, and my name is again Kelsey Nelson on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
All right, great presentation. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Really fascinating stuff. I love those statistics in there. I learned a lot from that presentation. I hope that everyone out in the audience did as well. What additional information would you like about the Okta solution? And I'll leave that up here for a moment, let everyone answer it. We have one more presentation after this. Then we'll do our Q&A panel, and then we'll announce the winners of our final 2 Amazon $100 gift cards. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. Let's get a few more responses. And now it's time for our next presentation on today's Gorilla Guide webisode. That is Mr. Craig Nunes, Chief Operating Officer at Nebulon. Thank you so much for being here, Craig. take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name's Craig Nunes, and I'm co-founder and chief operating officer here at Nebulon. We are a pioneer of cloud-defined storage for enterprise and service provider data centers. I'll give you a little background on Nebulon at the end of the presentation, but for now, let's focus on our topic of the day, tips for supporting a remote workforce, and specifically on enabling a remote workforce that might be newly remote, yet still tasked with keeping the business up and running. Let's talk specifically about enabling the remote IT workforce. I'm also going to narrow the discussion to a part of IT that typically has been the least remote workforce friendly, the primary storage infrastructure, okay? So, given the state of the world today, the remote workforce is the workforce of record right now. The good news is we can take several lessons from the consumer tech world. In this case, I'm going to use Nest, Google Nest. Think about it. A single thermostat changes temperature about 1,500 times a year. So a large home with 3 thermostats, it's going to change temperature about 5,000 times per year per house. In fact, it's the Nest-based cloud and the control plane within that enables a bunch of capabilities beyond just keeping your house at just the right temperature. You get thermostat software that's always up to date, remote monitoring and alerts, and the remote administration to respond if you need to make a change. You get simple automation of your thermostat with integrates nicely with some of the home automation tools and more. So my point being is, while the endpoint is really important, that is, this thermostat has to tick all the boxes to be considered as a replacement for my traditional, say, Honeywell thermostat. The real magic is in the features enabled in this cloud-based control plane. So if you could apply that cloud-based control plane to your data center and edge storage infrastructure, what would that look like? And I've got kind of 3 things for you to look for. So tip number 1, look for Gmail or Tesla style storage software updates. Let's talk about that. With traditional array-based storage, software updates are a time-consuming, often risky business, which can take weeks or months to plan and propagate, an update across a fleet of arrays. And just when you finish, you get a new update from your vendor and it starts all over again. It's a little like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Once you get to the end, it's often time to start all over again. Now it turns out that as much as 75% of the code delivered in those array software updates are related to management, the control plane, with just 25% related to the I/O path. And what this means is, by leveraging a cloud-based control plane for your on-prem storage, 75% of those updates just happen in the cloud as they are released. Nothing for you to do. New features just show up on your UI, much like Gmail, or for those of you lucky enough to cruise around in a Tesla. The I/O path is a much smaller code footprint since it needs to be highly performant. So software can be distributed in small, less frequent, and non-disruptive micro updates. With these, you might first do a small update in your lab, assuming everything checks out, push it to hundreds of endpoints with a single click. Super easy and automated. And again, all done remotely from your cloud-based UI, okay? Tip number 2, look for the remote management and administration features that turn storage operations into more of a SaaS-based service. A number of storage platforms in the market today provide some level of cloud-based monitoring, but administration is typically done in a completely separate local console. So alerts and troubleshooting are great, but co-locating AI ops and storage administration together means you can take immediate action on current and even predicted issues. You all know it's one thing to point to a fire, it's quite another to put it out, and we need to put those out. Beyond maintenance, a unified AIOps administration approach also lends itself to providing proactive recommendations so you can improve performance, keep users happy, improve utilization. You'll spend less on capacity. Okay. Tip number 3, make sure your next storage platform provides you a single API in the cloud to enumerate and automate all your storage assets on-prem. Cloud managed storage will give you the visibility and orchestration of your assets across sites, servers, and applications. And you can take advantage of a single API in the cloud to then automate all or a portion of those as needed. You get an aggregated view, or you can filter by data center, by application, by server group, whatever you choose. You can then ask interesting questions like, hey, where's my most available capacity? What's my VMware utilization look like? Where's it highest? Which of my container deployments is performing best? And how do I repeat those best practices across my organization? Perhaps the most important attribute of this approach is the fleet management benefits that you get from this cloud-based control plane. If you have 1,000 servers, let's say, so lots of servers, each with, let's say, 10 SSDs, and a critical SSD patch comes out from the SSD manufacturer, how would you handle that today? A cloud-based control plane will allow you to roll out a firmware update across 10,000 SSDs with a single click. Endpoint management is a huge strength of this kind of approach. So to quickly recap these 3 tips for easing the storage management burden on a remote IT workforce is to embrace any primary storage platform that delivers automated Gmail-like storage software updates, remote monitoring and administration in the same cloud-based service, and a single programmable endpoint in the cloud that'll simplify automation. Now, I told you at the top of the presentation, I'd give you a bit about my company, Nebulon. Here we've developed something we call cloud-defined storage. What is that? Cloud-defined storage is cloud-managed, server-based enterprise class storage. It effectively replaces your external storage array and moves enterprise class storage right into each of your servers. And unlike hyperconverged infrastructure, it consumes no application server CPU, memory, or network resource. So really cool. It's made up of 2 elements. Nebulon On, which is a secure cloud-based control plane, provides all of the operational benefits we just talked about. Automated software updates, AIOps-based remote management and administration, a simple automation with a single API endpoint in the cloud. The SPU, or Services Processing Unit, is kind of our Nest thermostat. It's our cloud-managed endpoint. And the SPU replaces the RAID or fiber channel card in your application server, connects directly to your server SSDs, and then serves that up as hypervisor container agnostic storage with all the enterprise data services traditionally only available with external storage arrays. The benefit of this approach, economics. Cloud-defined storage saves you up to half of what you might spend on an expensive external storage array and substantially reduces the operational overhead needed to manage your on-prem primary storage. So that's all I have for you today. I hope I gave you something to think about as you work through how you might continue your digital transformation while many of you are forced to continue to work and run your businesses remotely. If you do want to learn more about us at Nebulon, just hit our website, nebulon.com, for content or get a short demo. Thanks all. Stay safe.
All right, really cool presentation. Thank you, Craig. It's really innovative stuff that you guys are doing at Nebulon with cloud-defined storage, a totally new storage innovation, really, in my opinion. So I've just brought up the poll question here. What additional information would you like about the Nebulon solution? And I'll leave that up for just a moment. allow everyone to answer it. We are getting our presenters ready here for our live Q&A panel with Okta and Nebulon. So give me just a moment here and we'll have our presenters on the panel and we'll be answering your questions. So now's the time to get in those questions. If you have questions about Okta's security solution and multi-factor authentication challenges you might be facing, now's the time to get that in, and as well as storage challenges that you might be facing that Nebulon might be able to help with related to cloud-defined storage. Looks like one person said they're having trouble with the poll. Just push refresh on your web browser. 99% of the time that will resolve it. Make sure you're using Chrome as your web browser. Again, that typically resolves it as well. All right, so we're going to our panel now. And right after this, we'll be announcing the winner of the 2 remaining Amazon $100 gift cards. All right, now it's time for our second panel discussion on today's Gorilla Guide webisode event. I'm excited to have Kelsey on from Okta, as well as Craig from Nebulon. Kelsey and Craig, are you there?
I am here. Yep.
I am as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining us. And great presentations, by the way. Really cool stuff that you all are doing at Okta and Nebulon. So first question I'll direct to you, Kelsey, and that is, one of the polls that we did at the start of the event was actually around what's happening with IT budgets in relation to COVID-19. And so I think this question is very appropriate. They're asking, with the changing budgets, how can IT leaders tackle some of these challenges as economically as possible? Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, when I talk to a lot of CIOs and security leaders, this is definitely one of the top questions that comes up. And I think when you see a lot of those different frameworks from and all of the different pillars that you might need to start tackling or start investing in, it does seem like where do I begin, and does this require sort of a wholesale replacement, or which pieces do I need to start replacing? And I do think, I guess I would say first and foremost, when you're starting to go down a zero trust path, one of the maybe misconceptions is that you need to replace a lot of these different tools. In fact, it's for many organizations, it's adjusting how you're actually leveraging different solutions. So if you're using an endpoint or MDM vendor, how are you maybe shifting that and then leveraging some of those contextual signals alongside other pillars within the stack? So I think first and foremost, when you're starting to go down this path, it doesn't require a whole, I would say you don't need to replace everything. I think taking a look at some of those key areas and how can you optimize budget for things that are going to enhance other investments. So, certainly from the networking side, looking at things like ZTNA and pairing that with something like identity, can that help maybe alleviate some of the budgetary and capacity concerns of something like a VPN? Is one example of how you might be able to shift some of those security, some of those investments into things that are going to set you up for that longer term future.
Okay, yeah, great advice. I bet you're right. A lot of companies, I know I would anticipate if I were to implement zero trust that it would be a big, boom solution you put in the data center. But that's great advice. It's very interesting. You can replace things as you need to get this going as economically as possible. So cool info. Next question here goes to you, Craig. How do you see remote IT teams investigating or doing proof of concepts with new technologies where on-site personnel restrictions exist? Any tips on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think especially if you're tackling something new in your environment, you can do everything possible on the company's website. You can get demos, but I think a lot of folks are going to want to make sure that the technology is compatible with kind of the workloads they're running. And so the thing I would say is, for any on-prem infrastructure devices that really embrace a cloud-based operational model, you're going to be able to run those kind of proof of concepts from that vendor's cloud, and you're not going to have to, go into the data center and wire stuff up and be on site and all of that. That just is not a thing with those kinds of models. I was a big fan of Meraki Networks, back in the day, and they're now part of Cisco and have done a lot more since then. But with their approach to their networking devices, you could literally run a POC, from your kitchen table, and the same is true with our approach. We had a customer in Madrid during the height of the pandemic there, actually, run through our POC test plan completely remotely, and was able to kind of, go through, tick all the boxes, make sure that it was compatible with their environment. So I think, that is kind of another one of the benefits of embracing that approach with, whatever you're tackling in your data center. If you've got that, operational model in the cloud, that control plane in the cloud.
Absolutely, yeah. So that would definitely be a benefit to the Nebula and cloud-defined storage. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's like I say, we have run POCs with customers who've done it entirely remotely, like I say, from their kitchen table.
Nice, nice. All right. Next question for you, Kelsey. They're asking, are there any challenges from the early stages that you're still seeing organizations challenged by? Does that question resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it's referring to some of those early stages in the maturity, that
Okay.
maturity curve we were talking through. Yeah, so it's interesting when I think through that maturity curve, and just a quick refresher, it's kind of moving from maybe disparate systems to sort of unifying all of those systems into one pane of glass, and then adding and layering on things like contextual access management, and ultimately, true risk kind of at that top, and things like passwordless. And I think we do see most organizations, again, falling in sort of the beginning stages of that journey. They're maybe have some on-prem, they have cloud, they're starting to connect all of those. Actually, I think the biggest challenges we see for customers, or one of the data points I'll reference, is as organizations are moving through that process, we see sort of a drop off in terms of being able to deliver that for employees, and then separately for external, so partners, contractors. That part of the workforce is where we see kind of a big drop off in being able to deliver secure access for resources to workers versus those external users. And so I do think that's a big area of focus for many of the folks that we're talking to, and how they can start to extend and leverage a lot of these tools, not just for their core workforce, but the extended workforce as well.
Okay, excellent advice. I like that. Next question for you, Craig. Maybe you can take this one. This is a tough question, in my opinion. What's the one thing that IT organizations can do to help them adjust to this new normal of working remotely?
One thing, gosh, I think there's so many, but I think the probably the biggest thing they can do is work through the kind of the and especially from the storage perspective, is kind of work through where the biggest pain is that you're observing when you're running your day-to-day business on site, and work out how you can transform that activity to something that can really be done either automated or done remotely. And I think part of that comes again from our discussion a few minutes ago, depending on where those activities lie. just map out what the requirements are and how that operational model is going to allow you to kind of dissect that, automate it, and allow you to manage that entirely remotely. It's different for everybody, but I think there's a lot of tools at your fingertips in some of the more modern approaches with operations that are based in the cloud for your on-prem gear.
Absolutely, yeah, making things more efficient and addressing those pain points. Sounds like great advice. Next question for you, Kelsey, and I know we're starting to run out of time here in our Q&A, our short Q&A panel, and that is a number of people indicated that they'd like more information on the Okta Zero Trust and multi-factor authentication solutions. I mean, what do you recommend that they do to get started? I know a lot of people are new, probably still to Zero Trust and exactly what it is and how you would implement it. Do you have any resource recommendations for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I think it's just okta.com/zerotrust, where we have a lot more background information on some of these frameworks and also where identity plugs in. Another one I'd actually suggest, if you're kind of getting interested in seeing where you fall and what might be a good project to tackle next, we have something called the Okta Zero Trust Assessment. It's a free tool. It'll just place you on that maturity curve I talked about earlier, and then kind of show where you stack up against some of your peer organizations. So I might suggest starting there, find out where you are today, and then you can start to look at maybe where you want to tackle next.
Okay, nice. Excellent resources there for anybody who wants to learn more or get started with Okta and specifically Zero Trust as well. And Craig, same question for you. I'm sure everyone is new really to this idea of cloud-defined storage. What do you recommend that they do to get started learning more about it?
Yeah, my recommendation is just hit nebulon.com. There's written information. I'm kind of a show me person, and so there's videos that kind of walk you through the capabilities and show you, and then if that's interesting, you can dive into some of the technical white papers. But at the end of the day, I would hit the request a demo button. You're going to be connected with a solution architect, so a technical problem solver, and you guys can talk about what it is you're trying to do, and in that context, take a look, get a hands-on, whatever you need. So at a minimum, you'll learn a lot, and it won't take a lot of your time.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate both of your presentations. Kelsey, thank you so much. Craig, thank you so much for being on as well.
Thank you. Really great joining you all this morning, afternoon.
Yeah, great format. Super fun. Thanks.
Awesome. For more information, of course, visit okta.com and nebulon.com. Both sites have a lot of educational resources on how their solutions can help to support remote workforces. And now it's time for our final gift card giveaway. We have an Amazon $100 gift card going to Dean Bobout from North Carolina, Beabout from North Carolina. Congratulations, Dean. And our final $100 Amazon gift card is going to Timothy Barr from Maryland. Congratulations to all three prize winners. Best of luck to everyone. We've got more events coming up next week. In fact, after this event, you'll be automatically redirected to the ActualTech Media Event Center, and we would love to have you on a future event. I hope that you enjoyed this Gorilla Guide webisode series, Tips for Supporting a Remote Workforce. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.